before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit of my concern when I first read this passage. My concern about this passage is that for many of us, when we see these commands that James gives us, it almost seems like a list of things to do. Something that we've got to add to our already tough schedule and we've got to try harder at. And one of the reasons that's my concern is because that's so often my heart. So often God gives us commands in His Word, and I look at them as another list of something to add onto the list of things to do. So my desire is that what we'll see and what God will show us through this passage is that these things that these aspects of true Christianity that James gives us will work themselves out through a real relationship with our Father. It's really interesting when you look at the passage. It says, "If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world." It's really interesting when you look at it that James adds in the Father, because it could have been really easy for him to just say God or God, the creator of the universe or whatever, but he puts in the Father. And so as we're listening to these commands that James gives us, James is not intending us to look at these as like demands from an angry God, but these are loving commands from our Father. Like, think about that for a little bit. Our Heavenly Father, who wants our best, and He's giving us these commands. So that's my desire, is that God will do that in our hearts tonight. Really emphasize that these as we work out these commands in James, that it'll come from our relationship with our Father. So James is going to give us. Let's read it one more time. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So once again, right at the beginning, we see that James is touching on the topic of self-deception. Pastor Allen talked about it, it was a week or two ago, and how we can deceive our own hearts, and how we can think that we're something and then we're not. It's pretty crazy that we can actually do that with our own hearts, that we can tell ourselves that we're this and then we're not. We all hate when that happens to us from someone else, when someone else tells us they're something and they're not, or even if it's a product. Like, for instance, a burger that you may see on a McDonald's commercial or something like that, something like this, and it looks really good. It looks like actually thick and juicy, and it looks like it would taste good, and then you go up to McDonald's all excited about this thick, juicy burger, and then you get there and you order it, and you open your little box up, and all you get is this little thing. I mean, it looks like somebody sat on it. Yeah, so, and that annoys us. We hate that. We hate when something says it's going to be something and it's not. Or, how many of you guys have seen the third Hobbit? It's in theaters. Well, I'm not going to give it away for those of you who haven't. But basically, you guys know Alfred, the Master's right-hand man, Master of Lake Town's right-hand man. Well, he is basically the definition of a fake. At one point, he's telling the king to get all the gold and not save the people and get out of there as fast as possible. And then after the Master's dead and the people want to kill him because he was acting like that, he says, "No, I was for you guys. I didn't want to get the gold. I told the Master not to get the gold, and I wanted to save you guys." And so he's like switching from one thing to another, and he's a fake. One other example that I heard just this week is a book about a boy who came back from heaven. I'll read it to you. It says, the title of the book is "The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven." And the article says, the 2010 bestseller "The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven" is a fake. The book is about a 6-year-old boy who tells his story of visiting angels and heaven after being badly injured in a car crash. The book sold well and even peaked at number 46 on USA Today's list. The boy, this is kind of funny, ironically, his name is Alex Malarkey, and his father, Kevin Malarkey, are the co-authors. Alex now admits that the story was all made up. So, Alex and his father are fakes. Alex particularly, he said something happened and it didn't. And we hate when that happens to us, especially if it's like a friend who when times are good, they're all buddy, and then like when something happens, something goes wrong, they're nowhere to be found. And so we hate when that happens to us. And James is saying we can do that to our own hearts. We can say we're something and we're not. So we can deceive our own hearts. So the question is, are we deceived? Are we fake? Or are we real? And what does that even mean? So James is going to give us 3 indicators of true Christianity. So starting at number 1, true Christianity bridles the tongue. It's in verse 26. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So, what I think of when I hear bridling the tongue, first thing that kind of comes to my mind are the obvious things, like swearing or breaking into like a rage or something, like yelling at people, and it's like, wow, that guy definitely doesn't have his tongue bridled, and that's kind of the obvious things. But James is going a lot deeper than that. He's including gossiping and things we think of as little, cutting someone down behind their back, those little things that we say in order to lift ourselves up and put other people down. I want you guys to take a quick look at James 1:18. It's just a few verses earlier, and it says, "Of his own will," so talking about God, "he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures." So, of his own will, he brought us forth. God, using his words of truth, saved us and gave us life by his words. And so we see that our Father in heaven gives life through his words. And then it's not that gossiping, that breaking down, it's giving life. And then in Ephesians 4:29, you don't have to flip there, I'll read it. But it says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." And that's that building up instead of the corrupting talk, the breaking down, the little things we say. And so we see that God is calling us to imitate our Father in giving life through our speech. We are to be characterized by giving life, by speaking grace, and not breaking down. But as our Father gave us life through his words, we are to give others life and speak grace. And so one thing that this really hit me with was when I'm singing out to God during Sunday, and then in the next week at school, I'm breaking someone down. I'm saying something that is going to make them look bad and me look good. Then I'm fake. I'm saying that I'm at church. I'm saying that I'm this, and then I go back and I'm cutting someone down. So that's the first one that James gives us, is bridling our tongue. The second point is that true Christianity cares for the needy. It's in verse 27. It says, "Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction. So, when the Israelites, when God saved them out of Egypt, He gave them a bunch of commands. And one of the commands was that the Israelites were to care for the needy. They were supposed to take care of the sojourner, the widow, and the orphan. And this was to separate them from the rest of the world, that in that culture that they didn't do that. So they were to be separate from the world in that they cared for those who were helpless and needy. And God says in Deuteronomy 27, He gives this command, and then He says to them, He says to the Israelites, or He says to Moses, that the Israelites are to do this, for they are to remember that they were redeemed out of Egypt. So think about that for a little bit. The Israelites, in a very, very helpless situation in Egypt, slaves, and they were to remember, as they took care of the needy, as they took care of the helpless, they were to remember that they were redeemed from Egypt, that God saved them out of Egypt. And so we're to do the same. We're called to love those who may be unlovely, who may be hard to love, but we're called to go out and care for those who are in needy situations, because Christ died for us while we were still sinners, while we were needy, while we were helpless, and Christ saved us. So we're to care for the needy with the remembrance that God has redeemed us. Just like the Israelites were to remember that they were redeemed out of Egypt, we're to remember that we are redeemed, that God has redeemed us. He has saved us into the newness of life. And then we're also to recognize that mercy that God gave us in the initial redeeming us, He gives us